think a lot of people just have a misconception of sales where they think of like the sleazy car salesman gonna scam them and just get as much as they can, when in reality a good salesperson is a great consultant. Like, it's understanding your prospect, where are they at right now, what are the issues in their process, and you're giving them a solution to truly benefit them. Pushing people does not work, especially in B2B. You can't really force people to take meetings or buy from you. Desperation comes across because you're being selfish as a salesperson. You're thinking, this deal makes my quote, hits me my target, this deal makes me this commission, this deal will get me to President's Club. Like, you're thinking from a selfish point of view versus creating urgency is all about the prospect. It's showing the cost of inaction. If you don't change, here's what's going to happen.
Hello guys, welcome back to the channel. Welcome back to another sales podcast video. Today I'm here with Aaron. Can you introduce yourself, Aaron? What do you do? How did you end up here? What's your background?
100%. Yeah. So, hey everyone, my name's Aaron. I'm the founder of a company called Outbound OS. So I just help companies with top of funnel through consulting and coaching, also coach reps. But yeah, in terms of like how I got here, going back to the very start, sales is all I've ever done. 18, first ever job was selling face-to-face security in COVID. So that was really fun. But yeah, it started off really tough. Like, I did awful in that first ever job. I think I got one sale in 3 months. I really questioned if this was even worth pursuing, because it was commission only. Basically made no money. I was like, what am I doing? Am I built for this? And all those sort of thoughts crept in. But then the second role I took was the most sort of transformative because they taught me the importance of systems. They taught me how to focus on my input, how to focus on putting in consistent action every day. Then did pretty well there, built a team, eventually transitioned into tech sales just because I figured out the earnings are a lot better. So I thought may as well. And then first year as an SDR, did well, never missed quota, made President's Club, helped my manager to build the onboarding, moved to Revolut, become the youngest ever AE there at 21 years old. Started to do well, but again, I always enjoyed the coaching part and helping other sellers. So started doing it on the side, picked up, and then it sort of transitioned into a full-time thing now.
So now you're just basically doing your own business as a sales coach.
Exactly that, yeah.
When you were working in sales, what was your favorite position? Was it the SDR? Was it the AE?
It's a good question. I was a full cycle AE. So I was, we didn't have SDR. So I was basically still an SDR plus with extra responsibilities. So I'd probably say that was the most enjoyable, just because like when you book a meeting with someone, then run the discovery, then do the demo, then close the deal, like the full cycle is a fun thing to do. So yeah, full cycle AE, because there's so many skills what you have to have. So
I was told that you're kind of like a pro, very, very good at like outbound and lead list building. Why do you think outbound sales is still very critical for businesses, even with the rise of inbound? Do you even think that?
Yeah, it's a good question. Yeah, so in terms of like my skill set, top of funnel's the thing what I love. So outbound, booking meetings, like that's what I'm a nerd for, the systems and how to make it work, right? But yeah, in terms of the question, like, is outbound still important? I think 100%. Like, inbound's great, but it's quite hard to get a great inbound funnel going, right? Because you need to spend a lot on marketing. You need to do a lot of content. You just need a lot to get there through paid ads, or if you're doing it organic, it takes time to build up. There's just inbound's incredible, like when you get it going, but to get it to a stage where it's consistent, it just takes a lot of time or money. Whereas outbound, if you have the skill set, you can just start doing it and see instant results. So I don't think it's sort of inbound or outbound. I think the two go together. Like, it's not marketing versus sales, it's marketing plus sales together as a sort of one collaboration, if you will. So yeah, I think outbound is the most important thing. If you're a startup as well, getting your first customers, like you need to let people know who you are, because you won't have the brand recognition. So outbound's the best way to get there.
What are some common misconceptions you think people have about outbound? Like, I know a lot of people think it's very pushy, very aggressive.
Yeah, to be fair, I think those like opinions are fair. Like, when I used to do face-to-face sales, B2C sales is completely different from B2B. So I've done, again, face-to-face selling security. I've done insurance over the phones to consumers, but then I've also sold like 5 to 6 figure average contract values to B2B enterprises, right? Like the difference is completely different with how you do it. But I think a lot of people just have a misconception of sales where they think of like the sleazy car salesman gonna scam them and just get as much as they can, when in reality, a good salesperson is a great consultant. Like, it's understanding your prospect, where are they at right now? What are the issues in their process? And you're giving them a solution to truly benefit them. Obviously, it helps you because you make money, yeah. But the end goal is they benefit more than you do. They fix a major problem, and that's why they buy the product. So if I'm selling a $10,000 piece of software, for example, the impact to the business is going to be way greater than that 10,000. So yeah, I think a great salesperson's a great consultant. Pushing people does not work, especially in B2B. You can't really force people to take meetings or buy from you.
Did you try it before and failed at the beginning?
I think for me, because doing B2C, like cold calling, the whole goal is to close on the phone, right? Like you need someone to buy there and then. That's how you make your commission. So shifting from that to B2B, where the whole goal is to have a conversation and book the initial call and focus on their pains, like that was a tough shift for me because I'm so used to just dialing and trying to get a one call close to being that consultant. I think it can be tough for sellers if you go from B2C to B2B to sort of have that mindset shift. But yeah, it's sort of like a classic analogy what everyone says, but it's like being a doctor, right? Just listening to the prospect, understanding their issues and giving them the relevant solution to fix it. They have to be more pushy. And I think with B2C in general, the conception's more true there where people are a bit pushier because that's just the tactics that a lot of insurance companies or car salesmen or those people use. But in B2B, yeah, I think it's completely different. And if people actually saw like an SDR versus a car salesman, it's night and day difference, you know?
And how can you be still trying to sell without coming off as desperate? Like, for example, when you're in B2C.
It's a good question. I think it comes down to how you're viewing it. Like desperation comes across because you're being selfish as a salesperson. You're thinking this deal makes my quote, hits me my target. This deal makes me this commission. This deal will get me to President's Club. Like you're thinking from a selfish point of view versus creating urgency is all about the prospect. It's showing the cost of inaction. If you don't change, here's what's going to happen. I'm only trying to speed this up to help you out. So again, like, I don't know if I'm selling, I don't know, when I was at Revolut, for example, and the biggest value prop was around FX, right? Which is, you know, foreign exchange, different currency conversions. The cost of inaction would be if they don't change to Revolut and stay with their current provider, they are losing money on every single transaction. And we do the math. There's like every day you haven't switched, you're losing 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, and it stacks up, right? So again, I think creating urgency, showing cost of inaction to the prospect, but being selfish is thinking about you and I need this deal.
I also want to talk about building lead lists, which I know is kind of your expertise. So how do you start off when you start to build a targeted lead list? What's your first step in building a lead list and why is it important to get it right from the beginning?
In terms of like building lists, unless you're at a startup with 0 customers, I think the easiest thing to do is look at the success you've had before, whether that's you or the team. So look at the meetings that are being booked in general. And the whole point of this is, let's say, for example, 8 out of 10 companies who are booking meetings or who we've booked meetings with are software companies, then I'm going to target software companies. You know, it's like finding lookalike companies to be more specific with your ICP and who you're going to go after. Because I think a ton of people, they make really broad lists where they just go after basically everyone and anyone, generic messaging, and just try to cast the widest net and hope that some things come in. But I think a great list is a specific list. It's relevant. It's showing why now. So the first step, what I do is always look at the meetings that I've booked in the previous month, so I know who to go after. So industry, headcount size, location, all those sort of details. And then the second thing is having a trigger or like intent signal. It's like a hot topic now, but it's basically just saying, why am I reaching out to you? What has changed in your business to make now a good time for you to talk to me? So a generic one could be someone's just recently changed jobs, or the company's hiring, or the company's opened a new office location, etc. Just a relevant reason instead of a generic message. I think that's like step 1 of building a list.
So it's like personalization.
I think with personalization, there's like relevancy in personalization. So personalization is like on an account-based level. So just that company. So this could be, I don't know, if I'm looking at Zelic, it could be something that Doran's posted on LinkedIn or recent funding news because you've just raised more money. Like it's specific to your company and what was said in that raise, where there's a big focus on X. Like that's personal because it only applies to you. But relevancy, you can bucket multiple people into. So a job change, like 20 different people can have recently joined a company, but then I can make the same hypothesis on what could be a focus to all of them. So it's not personal because it's not just for them, but it's relevant because it's still specific.
And what's the role in like good quality data and how important it is to get good data? Like for example, at Zelic, we have a lead database of 450 plus million leads. What's the danger of using bad quality data?
I think data, it's you just immediately cut off thousands of potential prospects and hundreds of deals if you have bad data.
Mhm.
Right? Like let's say I want to target, I don't know, with my list there's 1,000 companies who apply to it. If I have great data, like using Zelic or something, maybe I get like 950 or a really high percentage of those people come back who I can reach out to versus
Mhm.
using a bad provider. If I get 50%, that's 500 people who I've instantly lost and can never talk to
Mm,
just because of bad data. So I think, quality data is one of the most important things when doing outreach. Because if you have a high bounce rate, even with emails, you can get marked as spam. So there's so many deeper things to it. But the big picture is less people to reach out to, less pipeline built. You craft the perfect email, you spend 10 minutes doing it, you send it, and then it just bounces instantly. And then you think, oh, let me try call him. And then you get the wrong number and you end up calling some old people's home or something, right? Like it just, it
it's a
doesn't
bad
make sense.
feeling.
There's nothing worse.
Yeah, I agree. And what are some like common mistakes you see salespeople make when building their lead list? Or mistakes you've done in the past?
Yeah, well, I think mistakes I've done, like I said at the start, I used to go so wide. I'd reach out to everyone. So my manager would give me, for example, I don't know, 400 accounts to go after. And then I just put them all into the same sequence and just reach out to all of them and just burn through my whole list instantly. It's what I see a lot when I'm coaching reps, like with what I do now. They use the same messaging for different personas. Different people care about different things. If I'm reaching out to a CFO, they have their own targets, which is about the bottom line and revenue and making sure it's profitable, versus a COO has different goals. It's about operations, how fast it is, streamlining it. So if I use the exact same pain in my email to these two people, it's not going to resonate because they have different goals. So I think another like really simple step is breaking up your list for the different personas you're going to reach out to and thinking, what does this person care about? Because it's a person on the other side of the email or on the other end of the phone. Everyone's selfish. Everyone has our own goals. So tap into that. Think about what they care about and resonate to them.
So you would say it's just like the mistake of not taking the time, like kind of being lazy about it, like being like, I'll just send the same thing to everybody.
Yeah, it's just generic. And everyone's like, I can save you time or I can make you more money. It's like, we can 10x your ROI. We can save you X amount of hours. It's just so generic. Like everybody's saying that. So if you want to resonate in a message, talk about a pain that persona cares about. And an easy way to do it is think, what do they do in the day-to-day? What are the issues? What's the impact of those issues? Like what happens if they stay the same? And then how do you solve it? And if you do that for each persona, the messaging is way more relevant and stands out.
And what's your kind of like system for writing a good cold email?
I think for the subject line, it's when I'm doing B2B, it's slightly different to like, a newsletter, etc. But B2B, I think don't make it salesy in the subject line. So a ton of people are like, slash your employment budget or 10x this, and it just instantly screams, I'm a salesperson. Again, I think salespeople sometimes don't think about the prospect. Prospects receive hundreds of messages every single day. They don't want to spend the time reading a salesperson's email if it's generic. So they just try to delete as much as they can. So if in the subject line it screams, I'm a salesperson, it's just going to get deleted. So I always make it seem informal. So if I'm talking to, again, going back to Revolut, when I'm reaching out to someone there, like a CFO, I'm just going to use like exchange rates, foreign fees, just something that the CFO talks about every single day anyway. So it sort of skips past their mental spam filter and slides under. Like, oh, this is a topic I talk about. And then for the email itself, like I always use the same structure. I called it like the tips framework. So the first line is the trigger, which is why am I reaching out to you? Hey, so you recently opened a new office. The second line is an implication, which is like a hypothesis. So based off that trigger, what could be a focus? So again, hey, so you opened a new office in, I don't know, Spain and the UK. Curious how you're managing the exchange rates. Get some thinking. The next line, P, is a problem. So what's a common issue with that? So again, going back to the example, typically companies use local banks what have 4% plus exchange fees. So now this is a problem. Then the cost of inaction. So what's the issue with the problem? So this could be meaning you can lose X amount of revenue on every single transaction. And then social proof and solution. We helped this other company achieve a specific result. And then soft call to action, open to hearing more. Like that's the exact same what I do for every single email. And I use it at Revolut. in the sort of coaching stuff, we have reps in cyber, reps at Deal, reps at Gong, reps at Salesforce, all these different industries. And it's always the same format because the structure makes it relevant. It's just what you put in, what makes it different.
And I guess it's also like really like easy to read. Like it's very light.
Yes, that's such a big part. I love that you touched on that because short emails win. 60 words, ideally like 50. Super short. Every line has a reason to be there. So you can just scan through the email. Nobody wants to receive a monologue, especially from a stranger. Like if someone sent me a 200-word email, I'm not reading it. I think is a big part. Making it short, making it simple.
How much time do you think you spend on average on a cold email like that?
It's funny because like when I coach people, like I have a community, so we do breakdown calls. So like people send me their emails and I just completely rewrite the email and we sort of do it in 2 minutes, then give feedback and all. It's fun, right? Because it's, again, I think it's like riding a bike, you know, once you've done it enough times, it just becomes like second nature. And that's why I think it's super important when you're doing outbound sales to have a system, because for me, it's always the same process. It's always trigger, implication, problem, social proof, solution, soft call to action. So I don't have to think that much. It's just the same thing every single time. But if I was doing it different every time, I'd be guessing. It could take me longer. I wouldn't reach out to as many prospects. And yeah, that's where issues come.
Can you share some of the worst subject lines you've seen before?
Oh, I could probably try look in my inbox and see if I can see any what stand out.
Just
I've got
like you
400
received
messages
today.
in my spam, so I'm sure there's like a few in there probably. This one, 10x your leads through LinkedIn. It's just, I'm never going to read that, you know? It's just, I can tell you're going to try to sell me some weird services. So I think the worst ones are super long as well.
Yeah.
I always keep it to 2 words because in an email, you can see the subject line and the preview line, which is just the first part of the text.
Yeah.
If you have a super long subject line, no one can read it anyway.
I also want to ask about how do you use automation in your outreach?
Yeah, automation, it's a big thing, especially now. So like when I'm sequencing, I use multi-channel sequencers. There's tons of different ones you can use, but I'm not going to do it manually when I can use a sequencer to do it for me. It just doesn't make sense. Obviously, cold calls are manual, but emails, even potentially LinkedIn messages, you can look into that to doing it automated. Call recordings, anything that doesn't need me to do, I'll let a tool do it for me, because then I can spend more time focusing on reaching out to more people and building more pipeline. It's like anything that takes away an admin task so I can focus on revenue generating activities. That is the value in automation. I don't think it's about to replace us. So I'm not a big fan of like AI SDRs or anything like that. Tools that can help you with your workflow to be more efficient. Yeah, that's how I love AI.
So that's how you make sure that your automation doesn't make your outreach feel like impersonal or very robotic.
Yeah, like I'll never use a tool to write an email for me because I haven't seen yet a great email that's been written by AI. I don't know if that's just me, but I'm not a big fan of letting AI do the job for me. I think it's good to help me do my job better. I'm not a fan of AI SDRs to be a robot, but it's like being a cyborg, you know, like using tech with you to make you more, get more done.
I also want to talk about scaling outbound. How do you scale your outbound, and how do you recommend sales team scale their outbounds as well?
Yeah, so in terms of like scaling outbound, I think step 1 is just testing on a small sample size to get data. So when I did a sequence, I'm not going to do it to, you know, thousands of prospects at once. I'm going to A/B test. I'm going to make sure my messaging resonates. So the first thing I did is reach out to a few hundred prospects, see the results, see what wasn't working, see what was working, make a new sequence again to a few hundred people until I was happy with the metrics. And then I started to scale my outreach, reach out to more people. But the most important thing, in my opinion, is tracking all your numbers, because numbers allow you to make logical decisions, right? Like numbers don't lie. It's black and white. It paints the picture. If one sequence has a 7% reply rate, the other one has 2%, it's not a question of which one I prefer. It's a question of what the data's telling me. Yes, just always track your numbers, look into all your metrics and let it tell you what's working.
Do you also use omnichannel outreach?
Yeah, I think it's so important because you could have the best email ever, but someone could just not check their inbox.
Yeah.
So it's pointless, right? You could have the best call script ever, but somebody could just flat out never pick up the phone, but they may respond to a LinkedIn DM. They may always check their LinkedIn, right? Even for me as an example, like it's very rare that I'll pick up a phone call to a random number, just because in the UK, there's a lot of like spam calls and stuff like that. So I just can't be bothered. Like everyone tries yeah, I'm not big on that. But if someone sent me a LinkedIn DM, it's like a 99% chance I'll respond. So by using omni-channel, you just give yourself a higher chance to get a response. Like meet the prospect where they're at. You don't know their preferred, method of communication. Is it email? Is it calls? Is it LinkedIn? But if you use all three, you give yourself a chance to find out and get a response on one of those platforms.
And how do you make sure that your messaging is consistent across those three or as many you use for your omnichannel?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think in terms of making it consistent with email and LinkedIn, like it's quite simple because again, with sort of tools like whatever you're using to send the messaging, you can sort of do it in one platform. So I always have the same messaging, but I always focus on the same pains, right? Like the messaging won't drastically change from LinkedIn to email. It stays consistent, but I'm just trying to give the prospect as many chances to reply. I'm like, look, if you don't want to respond on email, here's a LinkedIn message with a similar topic. If you don't want to respond on LinkedIn, I'm going to call you and talk about those issues on the phone, right? So I think the pain stays the same, like the messaging, but it's just reaching out through different channels to basically meet them where they are.
And what's your favorite outreach?
Email. 100%.
Email.
And it's weird. A lot of people hate email or see no results, but like I love calls. Don't get me wrong. I think calls are the fastest way to book a meeting. Like when you're on the phone with someone, you can talk through objections, you can handle it, you really dig into their specific issue and book a meeting. So calls are incredible. LinkedIn messages, again, if you do it well, can be great. But I just think email, it has such a good chance to scale as well because you can reach out to so many people at once. And if you have relevant messaging that like clicks with them, if you have like a 8% reply rate and you reach out to 100 people in a day, it can work well. So yeah, email was my biggest channel as an SDR, as an AE, and it's what I love doing the most for sure.
And how did you handle email objections?
I think in email it's so hard because you don't want to have like a ping pong match back and forth with like replies because it can take like
they just stop replying. People just like block you.
Yeah, exactly. They're just not interested, right? So if someone says like unsubscribe, I'm not going to try to overcome that. I'm just going to let them go. Just unsub. It's not worth it. But I think if people have like, generic objections where they're like, hey, could make sense to reach back out in Q4, I just pick up the phone and try to call them because on the phone, it's a lot easier, as you've just said, to overcome it because you can talk to them. You can handle an objection a lot easier when you're talking to someone instead of a message, because again, how I can say something in an email, you can read that completely different, because you can't hear me saying it, so you don't understand the tonality I'm delivering it with. So yeah, I think a lot of times when people respond as well, they'll normally have the number in their signature, or I just use a tool. Again, you can use like Zelic, find someone's phone number and just pick up the phone, just talk to them and try to book them on.
So you would say your favorite is email, but then if email doesn't work, then it's phone.
I think a lot of people, they're sort of like, if I said I love email, people would think I'd have a pitchfork up and be like, oh, never cold call, never do emails. I see it a lot on LinkedIn where people are like, cold email's terrible. Here's why cold calling's like, it's not about one or the other. All of them help each other. Like, again, there was data ran by Gong and it got published in the book by Nick Cegelski and Arman Farouk, like cold calling sucks, that's why it works. And then the data showed that when you send an email, it leads to a higher percentage chance that you'll get a pickup. So it's like omni-channel, like my emails help my calls help my emails. If I call someone and they've seen an email from me, my name's a bit familiar. If I've sent them a video on LinkedIn, then I drop them an email. Like they all tie in together. So yeah, I don't think it's no one channel's dead. They all work great, so use them all.
So true. I have one last question, which is, what's your advice to use data well?
Yeah, I'm so glad you asked that actually, because I think data is the most important thing. Because again, if you have numbers to make it up, it's a logical decision. You're no longer guessing. And I think a lot of reps or sales teams try to guess their way to quota. They're like, oh, just do more dials. But they don't know like the parts of it. So it's not just dials made. This is like one thing what I'd say is when you're making cold calls, look at the amount of dials, look at the connect rate you have, look at the conversation to meeting booked ratio, and then look at your show rate. So then you can reverse engineer the amount of dials and all the metrics, what leads to your goal. So if you want to book 8 meetings a month through calling and you have an 80% show rate, you need to book 10 meetings. But then let's say you have a 20% conversion from when someone picks up the phone to booking a meeting, like a conversation. So that means I need 50 conversations. Now, if I have a 5% connect rate, that means I need to make 1,000 dials to have 50 conversations, blah, blah, blah. 20 days in a month, in a working month, that's 50 dials a day. So now, instead of saying I need to book 8 meetings, I've used my metrics and I've used the data to reverse engineer and work out
Mhm.
each step to hit my goal. So suddenly it becomes an input goal, which I can control. I can control my input, but I can't control the output. Like if someone,
Yeah.
of course, like, you know, if you have a better pitch, your conversions are going to be higher, but ultimately you can't force somebody to say yes. So
Yeah.
you have to focus on what's in your control, which is the input.
Mhm.
So yeah, I'd always say use the data to figure out what input goals do you need to do. And in terms of building
Mhm.
lists, again, look at the meetings you've booked, look at your best customers to make your list more specific, to figure out
Mhm.
who are the best people to reach out to.
I feel like as a salesperson, you have to be like very self-aware. You really need to like look at what you're doing right and wrong. And I don't know if it has ever happened to you that kind of your pride was too big to like look at the bad things you did on your data, and you were like, yeah, well, I'm just still gonna keep doing that.
I think it happens to everyone. Like, I don't know, let's say you cold call them one day, you'll book a meeting on your first dial or on your first few dials, and suddenly you think you're top of the world. You're like, oh, this is easy. I'm going to crush it. And then for the next like 2 days, you book no meetings because you got overconfident, right? I think that happens because, again, people focus on the output. They think if I get a yes, that's good. If I get a no, that's bad. Versus if you're focusing on working a system, yeses are inevitable and no's are inevitable. So a yes or a no shouldn't change my emotion. If I'm cold calling and I book a meeting on the phone, I'm not going to jump for joy. The same way if someone tells me to F off on the phone, I'm not going to sit there crying, because both are meant to happen. Like, I'm going to get yes or no's. That's guaranteed. I know if I work my system and do the 50 dials a day, have the 1,000 dials that give me 50 conversations, I'll book 10 of them, 8 of them will show up into meetings. So why do I care when the yes is coming? Because I
That's
know
a
if I
good
work the system,
motivation.
it will come. Yeah. Don't get excited on the yeses or sad on the no's. Excited indifference is what they called it. Be excited to work the system, but be indifferent to the result.
Thank you so much, Aaron, for talking to me, for talking to us. Can you tell us where people can find you?
Yeah, on LinkedIn, it's Aaron Reeves if you want to check me out. About to cross 30K as well. So huge thank you to everyone who's following. Try to post as much actionable tips as possible. I think that's the best place. All my other links, the newsletter, the free community, what I've just launched, it's all on LinkedIn. So yeah, just go find me there.